Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Anna Robinson, and I am the West Virginia Program Manager and Communications Coordinator for the One America Movement. Thank you guys so much for joining us today for another episode of Candid Conversations. For those of you who don't know, Candid Conversations is a part of our new Corona Rebuild initiative, where we connect the challenges of COVID-19, the divisions in our country, and the roles we each have to play in order to move forward together. Every Friday, in this case Thursday, we'll feature someone from the One America Movement Network on our show to get candid about how the coronavirus pandemic has affected folks in communities across the United States. We'll cover issues related to race, food insecurity, health disparities, mental health, and much, much more. Joining us today is Sarah Streyder to discuss Independence Day, the American Promise, and how the military and military spouses have been affected by COVID-19. Sarah is an advocate, organizer, and proud military spouse who serves as the director of the Secure Families Initiative, where she helps other military spouses and family members raise their voices on foreign policy issues that affect their lives. Sarah received her master's degree in public policy from Cambridge University, and she was recognized as the AFI Quantico Spouse of the Year for 2020. Welcome, Sarah. We are so excited to have you.
Thanks, Anna. I'm glad to be here.
Amazing, amazing. How's life been for you so far?
Chaotic like everyone else's, I'm sure.
Yeah, we were just talking before the live stream started, and with COVID-19 and everything else that's going on, Sarah was telling me that she's also dealing with a move, which is just insane in the midst of all of this craziness. So I hope that everything goes well with that, but we're going to go ahead and jump right in. So my first question for you, can you talk about your overall experience as a military spouse? What does that lifestyle look like for those who don't know?
Yeah, happy to talk about it. I myself did not grow up in a military family. So when my boyfriend since high school approached me and said, "Hey, I'd like to enlist," I was like, "What?" And I came to this lifestyle, this community with a lot of misgivings and uncertainty. I was like, how am I going to make friends when we move around so often? What's it going to be like? I've been really pleasantly surprised by the lifelong friendships I've been able to forge, and how much I've learned, frankly, is by being part of the military community. But it's hard. The military will send you somewhere. It will probably be far away from any family or friends that you had, which can make for a really isolating and lonely experience. I'd say that's especially true for spouses of color who might find it harder to break into some of the spouse groups that do exist there. It's hard to find or keep a job unless it's something remote. I'm hoping that changes now with COVID as our workplace is evolving, but historically you've seen really high unemployment rates, and I know I have struggled with that personally myself. But overall, I think the biggest thing that's important for folks to understand is that it is an emotionally draining constant of anxiety, because you never know when your spouse or your partner is going to be sent into harm's way. And you try and make plans. We like to joke that you can sketch your plans in pencil, but it's up to the Pentagon to put it into ink. So if you're a planner like myself, it can be really stressful not knowing what the future looks like. And if I could share just one story that I think kind of epitomizes that. So last year when my spouse was deployed, our car engine light came on. And I was like, this is something Jason usually deals with. Okay. And so I took it to the auto repair shop just down the hill on base. And the mechanic told me how many thousands of dollars it was going to cost to fix. And I just broke down crying. I just melted down on that floor, because it wasn't that the car itself was the biggest of deals. It was just that it was the millionth thing that day, that week, that month, that was a reminder that I was having to deal with it all alone, because my spouse was, thousands of miles away, in a less safe part of the world. And that anxiety just, you kind of carry you with it, and you never know what is going to break your back, whether it's a meltdown at the grocery store or the auto repair shop or the childcare center. That's, I think, that piece that isn't always clear to folks outside our community.
Yeah, definitely. And I think when you're going through something, it's almost like that saying, when it rains, it pours, right? So when you have all these things that are just stacking on top of each other, that one small thing, I mean, it would, it could be teeny tiny, but to you, it's kind of like I hate to use icing on top of the cake because that sounds like a positive, but it's just, it's so much that you're going through, and just adding one more thing on top of that just seems like, it could really harm anyone's emotional health for sure. So thank you for sharing that with me. That kind of goes into my next question, actually. There are a lot of misconceptions that people have about military spouses, and a lot of them, unfortunately, happen to be negative. So I was wondering if you could share what you wish people knew about military spouses and military families.
Yeah. If there's one thing folks understand, I want them to know our diversity. We come from every single background, community of this country, of this world. As a reminder, we have international spouses. We have every type of family unit you might think of. We hold every different kind of political or religious belief. I think the biggest misconception is that there is one stereotypical image of what a military spouse, partner, family looks like. And I guarantee you there are way more types of us out there. And that's really what I would love for folks to understand most. And I guess also one more thing. So just the other day, I had an interview with someone in the media, and so I was prepping my notes. And as I prepared them, I put at the top what I expected to be her first few questions, about my spouse, his work, his rank, his job, and then transition to my part, because that's typically how things go. And it really caught me off guard when the very first question she asked was, okay, so who are you and what do you do? And I loved it. It was great, because I think another misconception is that, a military spouse is defined by the person they're married to, by their service member. And while being affiliated with the military can be a very formative part of all of our identities, we have a wide swath of passions and professional experiences, hobbies, you name it, that define us and shape us way more. And so that kind of looking at us as three-dimensional people rather than this two-dimensional image, I think, is another misconception I would love to allay.
Yeah, definitely. I can understand that. I think a lot of women, especially when they get married, are oftentimes, defined by their husband. So I can only imagine how difficult it can be to be married to a man in the military, because then, your whole world, a lot of people would assume your whole world revolves around that. And I'm sure much of it does, but you are, your own person, you're an individual. And I appreciate the fact that media, that media person was interested in who you are, because that's important as well.
Me too. If you ever want to make a military partners day, do just that.
I actually have a follow-up for that. So you mentioned earlier that it's difficult for military spouses to maintain work, just, with all the moving and everything. And we're now talking about individuality and maintaining that while you're in a marriage with military personnel. So I'm just curious, for you personally, what have you done to maintain your autonomy, I guess?
Whew. No, it's a good question. I think I'll just speak for myself. I certainly gone on a journey. When my husband went off to boot camp, the very same day that I got the phone call from him, that was going to be the last phone call I was going to get for 9 weeks, was the same day that I met President Obama, who I got to intern for back in 2015. And so it was talk about a roller coaster of emotions kind of day.
Oh, yeah.
And so I was already I was working, I had this plan. I loved my internship. I wanted to get a full-time job, that kind of thing. It was a very DC focused life. And sure enough, 3 months later, Jason calls and says, we're getting stationed in Nebraska. And I, bawled my eyes out. I grieved the end of my life, which I thought it was. It's a little melodramatic, of course. But, we had a decision to make of what we wanted to do with that information. And I think it looks different for everyone. So for us, we were young. We did not have kids. It felt like the best thing to do was for me to keep getting to do the jobs that I had the opportunity to have at that time, even if it meant living apart from my spouse. So we spent our 2.5 years married, living halfway across the country from each other. Not ideal, would not recommend as, plan A, but it felt important for me to be able to kind of get enough professional experience that would hopefully help later down the line as I looked for a job in Nebraska, where it might have been a little harder to find something in my field. And then later, a few years later, I left again to go get my master's degree because I thought it was kind of an important time to do that. And so we actually lived in different countries for that, because I got my degree in the UK, like you said. Yeah. So yeah, for me, maintaining my autonomy, it has meant pursuing opportunities to kind of keep up my professional credentials and do what fulfills me and what I love, even when it makes it kind of harder on us as a family. And I know that that's not always going to be the best choice for us moving forward, especially if kids enter into the picture. So from then on, it'll be, hoping that remote opportunities remain available, or I will run my own thing if that's what it takes for me to find a job.
Yeah.
But that's a tough choice, right? And everyone makes it differently and weighs the pros and cons differently. And yeah.
Definitely. And I'm sure that is difficult, but I feel like it's one of those lifestyles where you kind of have to make, both sides have to make sacrifices. And you really have to work together to make sure that, the marriage works. But I really do appreciate that, because I think a lot of people, they believe once you marry someone in the military, your life is over and all of your goals and dreams and aspirations are just out of the window. But I appreciate you sharing that, because that's just not true. So my next question actually has to do with our current situation. How, if you could, obviously I know you can't speak for everyone, but how has the coronavirus pandemic affected you and other military spouses or families?
Yeah. COVID is really, it's reflected some of both the best and worst aspects of being in the military family life. So remember at the beginning of the pandemic when all the talking heads on TV were referencing it as the great equalizer, and how quickly we learned that is so not the case. That if, when it hit community, already, I think that's a really helpful frame when it comes to understanding how it's affected military families. So this life is already very lonely, very isolating. Like I said, you are far away from your support system. So now you're adding physical distancing and quarantine. Great. Good luck making new friends, or knowing who to reach out to if you need a delivery of something. So that has been really hard. There was a stop motion order that came down at some point where military personnel weren't allowed to travel, which meant that for service members who were deployed or stationed overseas, their homecomings got delayed for months and months or canceled altogether. Imagine being, you're the spouse back home. Let's say you've been a single parent for the last 6 months. I know one gal who's got 5 daughters, and she has been that single parent for up to 10 months at this point, because the light at the end of the tunnel that she was already always like planning on and focusing on just kept getting pushed further and further out of reach. It can be demoralizing and it can be exhausting. And this comes on top of the fact we've already been at war for 2 decades, and that has spread our military families really thin. So like you said earlier, not icing on the cake maybe, but maybe straw that kills the camel's back or something like that. That's COVID is compiling on what is already hard. The flip side is military families are extremely resilient and adaptive. We've had to be, based on all of what I just explained. I know I saw a few articles that came down talking about like lessons civilians could learn from military families, which I think is great. I just always want to make sure that these hard-earned traits of military families aren't taken for granted, because they've come at great sacrifice, and that deserves, I guess, attention, and that should inform decisions we make over war and peace moving forward.
Definitely. And if you could summarize what you think those traits are, what would you say?
Yeah, we know what it's like to have our plans torn asunder. So we're used to making multiple contingencies and getting ready for whatever information comes down, used to operating out of uncertainty and just kind of taking the next best step, even if you don't know. When a potential employer says, where do you want to be in 5 years? Ha, good luck answering that question. And having, and like you said earlier, the strength of your marriage is really important. Or of course your relationship, even if it's not a marriage relationship. Being able to communicate really openly and honestly with your partner and expressing the positive, negative, and everywhere in between. I think that is crucial to making it through and having a strong foundation that you can build off.
I 100% agree. 100%.
Yeah, that's universal right there.
Absolutely. Amazing. Okay. So you talked about the fact that when all of this stuff first started happening, you were interning for President Barack Obama. So I actually have a question for you that's based on a quote that he said. So he once said, "Now, as a nation, we don't promise equal outcomes, but we were founded on the idea that everybody should have an equal opportunity to succeed. No matter who you are, what you look like, where you come from, you can make it. That's an essential promise of America." Given all of the challenges that we've been discussing lately as a nation, the pandemic and everything that's come along with it, from job loss, food insecurity, homelessness, sickness, and death. In addition to that, the protests and the calls for justice. I was wondering if you could tell me what you think it means. And this is kind of a loaded, question, but what do you think it means to be an American, and how do you view the American promise?
Yeah, I'm glad you gave me time to think about this ahead of time, Anna. I will say, because it's hard. I'll start with the American promise, and when I think of it, I think of it as this unattained aspiration. It's something that we are aiming toward and have not yet arrived at. And I think even President Obama would be the first person to admit that this image of equal opportunity has yet to be actualized for everyone, right? We still have racism, sexism, ableism, all the other isms baked into the functions that fuel our system. And as long as that's true, we're not going to have equal opportunities, let alone outcomes. So that is how I hold, kind of these two things in tension, both a tremendous pride at the ideals that our country has historically articulated and aimed for, as well as a clear-eyed understanding that we are far from there and have to keep putting in the work. So that kind of relates to, therefore, how I see myself, the role that I play in that as an American, or as I wish the term were, I wish we had a word in English for United Statesian.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes, I agree. America's a large place, so, and it includes more than just the U.S. So agreed.
Right. And in Spanish, there is that word. It's estadounidense. And so I just, can we borrow it? We borrow tons of words from other languages already.
Yes, absolutely.
So as a United Statesian, I see the role that I play as trying to make that promise more closer to a reality for everyone. I take my civic engagement very seriously because I think of the people in my life who don't have that. So I got my master's abroad, which meant that I made friends with a lot of international students, all of whom are affected by our country's foreign policy decisions because the United States is such a dominant force in the world, but they don't have any say. I even have friends here who are not themselves citizens and therefore cannot vote. And their lives are clearly affected by domestic policy as well, and also do not have a say. I even think of, the generations of women who came before me, who fought for my ability to express my voice at the ballot box. I owe it to every single one of those people to not waste a single ounce of potential that I have. Privilege. It truly is a privilege to influence and inform all of the decisions that we make. So my role is one of obligation, but I do it happily.
I'm glad to hear that. Because I think a lot of people who may not realize, and I hate to use the word privilege actually, because I think a lot of people hear that and they admit it, they recoil. They don't like that. But I like to hear that you recognize that you do have a privilege that a lot of other people don't have, and that you're trying to use your voice to speak up for others so that we can get closer to what we all envision the American promise to be. So I really appreciate you saying that. Okay, great. So my last question for you. So Saturday is the 4th of July. So I was wondering if you could talk about what Independence Day means to you.
So my mom was my U.S. history teacher in 8th grade.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, I was lucky. She's a fabulous teacher. And she had all of us dress up as different characters from the first Continental Congress back in the day. I dressed up as Thomas McKean, who was a Delaware delegate. Which is also say, when I think of like Independence Day, the first image that always comes to my mind is of children in oversized historical costumes trying to find consensus. And, that's not a completely inaccurate portrayal probably of what it really was like. A bunch of ragtag people from different backgrounds trying to find whatever common ground they could. And I think that's kind of a fun image to have. But in terms of the holiday, the commemoration, I'll be honest, or I'll be candid. I think it's a bit odd that the 4th of July has morphed over the years into being such a military-centric holiday with all the pomp and circumstances. Because, well, if I could wave a magic wand and make 2 changes, this is what they would be. First of all, especially this year, the best way for you to show appreciation to the military community for their service is not by risking public health and going to any crowded events. Please do us all a favor, stay home, make it so that this pandemic stops risking our national security and disrupting our families' lives. I would really appreciate if folks kept that in mind. If you feel so compelled, there are ways that you can give. You can donate time and resources to different military family support or advocacy organizations, whether that's mine that focuses on voting and foreign policy, or one of the many other fantastic programs out there. If you feel so compelled, that is a great way to express gratitude that does not perpetuate COVID-19. But second magic wand, second genie's wish. I wish we could expand the typical commemorative celebrations to include all of the essential workers that we've now come to really appreciate that make our country run, whether it's teachers, firefighters, sanitation workers, nurses, you name it. Their forms of service are, similarly invaluable and requiring of sacrifice, whether that's taking lower pay or the hours or the stress. I mean, I wish that the 4th of July in folks' mind was more expansive as to whom we honor and put on that platform.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I have a friend who's serving right now in the Air Force, and he tells me that he always feels kind of awkward when people come up to him and say, "Oh, thank you for your service," And we've talked about how I think COVID-19 has really, it's really shown us, that heroes exist in a lot of different places, and we tend to really glorify people in the military, police officers, firefighters, but we forget about the doctors and the nurses, and even the cashier at Walmart, who has put their life on the line to make sure that you're able to go and buy all of your necessities. And I 100% agree that we should take more time to really honor all Americans. So I definitely agree with that. But unfortunately, we are running out of time, and I want to give you an opportunity to talk about the Secure Families Initiative. But Sarah, thank you so much for joining us today. I've had a really great time talking with you. But before you head out, would you like to share where our viewers can learn more about you and your work?
Absolutely. Check us out. Our website is securefamiliesinitiative.org. We've also got 3 different social media handles, so you can find us on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. Definitely recommend, whether you're part of the military community or not. I think we've got a lot of resources and insight that are valuable for all folks. And one of the things that we focus a lot on civic engagement amongst the military family community, whether that's voting, raising your voice on issues you care about, or eventually would love to see more of us running for office. And the reason we do that is, not only are military families stakeholders in the decisions that are being made, especially ones about war and peace, because we're the ones that affects most here back at home, but also I think our voices are uniquely valuable to the political process in general. We have lived all over the country, all over the world, which means that we've seen lots of different systems and how they work. And I think that gives us kind of a cool superpower when it comes to the ballot box, right? We've got that insight. And so anyway, I my passion is about empowering this community to be as participative as they can. And even if you're, like I said, a non-military supporter, there are ways that you can help make that a reality and learn from the voices that we help to try and elevate, so that, per previous question and answer, you can see the diversity that truly is the case within our family fabric.
Definitely. Amazing. All right. Well, thank you so much again for sharing with us. All right, everyone, please don't forget to check out our website, www.oneamericamovement.org. Sorry, I didn't take that other banner down. You can also find us on Facebook if you search the One America Movement, and on Twitter at @one__America. Make sure you join in next week for a conversation about food insecurity with one of our One America West Virginia leaders, Pastor Joel Rainey. Until then, I hope you all have a wonderful weekend and an amazing Independence Day. Bye.